Are we there? Do we have a quorum? Okay, very good. Okay. Good morning, members of the MAG 911 Study Committee. This meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphones when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you'd like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table. If you purchase a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members. So MAG staff, will you do that for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will go through the list of members. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Dale Nanigay.
Present.
Thank you, Dale. Dan Cotterman online.
Here.
Thank you,
Here.
Dan.
Oh, sorry.
Gotcha. Thank you, Dan. Joshua Wright online.
Here.
Thank you, Joshua. David Raymer also online.
I am here. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Chair Phelps.
Present.
Thank you. Santiago Rodriguez.
Present.
Thank you. Chair Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Travis Cutright.
Here.
Thank you. Brittany Brunet.
Present.
Thank you. Scott Walker.
Present.
Thank you. Jesse Cooper.
Present.
Thank you. Robert Bokinski.
Present online.
Thank you. Karen Sutherland.
Present.
Thank you, Karen. And Catherine Masters online.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We'll now proceed to item number 2. Our next item is a call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience. Agenda items unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Do we have any requests to speak?
We have not received any requests to speak and no public comments have been received.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's proceed to item number 3. This item is the approval of the December 19th, 2022 meeting minutes. Does any member of the committee have any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, prior to the approval of this, so do I have a motion to approve the minutes? I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Brittany Brunet, Peoria PD.
All right, so
second.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Kevin Phelps and a second from Brittany Brunet for the minutes. All right, can we have a voice vote of those in the room? Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Staff, can you do roll call of members participating virtually?
Yes, thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Those online. Dan Cotterman.
Aye.
Thank you. Joshua Wright.
Aye.
Thank you. David Raymer.
Aye.
Thank you, David. Robert Bokinski.
Aye.
You and Catherine Masters.
Aye.
Chair, the item passes.
Thank you. We'll now move to agenda item number 4. For the next agenda item, the committee will discuss the candidate proposals for the selection of a 911 consultant and the 911 advisory team's recommendation. The committee will be asked to approve the 911 advisory team's recommended candidate for the position, for the contract for the position. Audrey Skidmore, a MAG Information Technology Director, will provide an update. Audrey.
Thank you, chairs, members of the committee. The advisory team met on the 19th to review the 2 quotes that we did receive. They made a selection of federal engineering. And the recommendation, proposed recommendation going forward would be to recommend approval of federal engineering as the 911 consultant and for their contract not to exceed $150,000. I did want to bring to the committee's attention that in the quotes we received, neither of the vendors felt that they could complete the work before the end of May or beginning of June.
Which Audrey what did we originally have in there? April?
Yeah, our target was April, in response to, where the committee wanted to be, but neither of them felt they could complete the work in that time frame.
Audrey, do you have in front of you, can you remind us who was on that selection committee? I think it's good for us to remind ourselves who was part of that conversation. Or
Chantal,
am I
can you please
catching
read
up?
that
I
off?
apologize. I'm sure they're sitting around, some of you are sitting around the table, but
Yes,
you want to confess.
I was one of them.
So Brittany and Scott and, okay, so, all right, Travis. I think we've got, was there anybody else that we're missing? I think Crystal was on there. Yeah, okay.
right. Do you want to
Um,
check your list and see if there was anybody who's
Where's Josh?
not included?
So I can go ahead and give you that.
yeah, that'd be fine. Thank you.
information.
Just for the record, I think we'd be good.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and read those names. It was Brittany Brunet, Scott Walker, Jesse Cooper, Dan Cotterman, Travis Cartwright, Crystal Sipe, and Brent Askin.
Very good. Thank you. So members that were part of that selection committee, comments you want to share with us for the rest of us who were not participating in that? I'll just kind of give us a summary. It sounds like you had 2 proposals. Anything that highlight? Brittany, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit on that. And then anybody else can chime in after I speak. In reviewing both of them, I felt both of them were pretty equal. Mission Critical, their cost was upwards of 190,000 for the cost. Federal Engineering was significantly lower in cost, and that was probably more. I think the swaying decision for the group was the cost. Federal Engineering, their original time frame that they gave was July, and that was something that I think Rocky was going to go back and see if they could even possibly try to commit to a June time frame in getting it completed. Both of them, the references received. Mission Critical, we got 1 back. When looking at the reference ratings, it was all 5s. Federal Engineering, 2 references, 4s and 5s. Really, when you look at it, I felt the references were pretty equal. Nothing glowing or any concerns. Looking at both the proposals for Federal Engineering and Mission Critical, everything that they provided, I felt was pretty fair, pretty equal. Nothing more significant than the other. We couldn't go wrong with either of the ones that we were going to choose. So if anybody else wants to add to
Anybody
that.
else?
Chairman Brady.
Scott, go ahead.
So I will concur with Brittany's comments. I would say that we were fortunate. We had 2 good proposals, both qualified vendors. I think the group spent time researching and looking at the proposals, the references, the work that being completed, and both seemed very, very competent to do that. They had identified teams, technical experts, and other SMEs. I think they both identified the time it would take. And so in the end, we were fortunate to be able to really probably not make a bad choice. And as Brittany said, it really did come down to probably cost more than anything else. And the group, moved forward with the consensus, I believe, with Federal Engineering.
So Audrey, maybe you can help me out. I remember when we were having this conversation about the original timeline, which obviously we're not going to be able to meet. The idea was to have that early enough because I don't want to make up something, but
You had expressed Chairman, you had
Okay.
expressed the desire to have it in time for budgeting
that's what it
purposes.
was, yeah.
But they just didn't feel they could do
Yeah,
the
so-
quality of work in time.
So the balance of timing for a budget or versus getting a quality work that I think it sounds like the committee would be comfortable with recognizing that. So did anybody have a problem? Does anybody have a problem, I guess, based on what you heard about, I guess we don't really have a choice, but acknowledging that this may take longer. Are we comfortable moving forward with that? Kevin, did you want to say
Yeah,
something?
Mr. Chair, I guess my thought is in looking at it, I know the discussion was going back and see if they can push it up a month. I don't see what we could do with that information because typically July for most of the organizations are pretty well out. So really the first chance we'll meet as a committee would be August. So I'd rather give them the extra time, make sure it's thorough and that they've got it, really packaged well. So I think
Okay.
I would just say, since we can't probably look at it until August as a committee, why push them to accelerate it and maybe not get as good a report?
Good point. Fair point. All right. Any other comments on this item from the committee members?
Chair Brady,
Scott.
in my role with Phoenix Fire overseeing MR 911, I do think it's important that the committee hears in our conversation with the state ADOA office and state 911 office, they had expressed a strong desire to have a decision from this committee as far as maybe a direction we would be going as far as retaining MR 911 or moving to the state plan by April. We did inform them that was a very aggressive goal, and we all know we tried to make that with this committee as far as April, but it appears the consultants will not be able to meet that goal. But I think it's important that everybody knows that the state certainly has a desire to hear that or get an answer sooner than later, again, for them as far as funding and planning their funding as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think we need to work. Yeah, Audrey, go ahead.
Chairman, so just to clarify, from my understanding, then the desire of the committee is not that I necessarily push them hard to finish that earlier, but that we let them follow the schedule that they feel is
Yeah, Audrey,
appropriate.
I think Chair Phelps brings up a good point. I mean, July doesn't help us, right? I mean, push it from July to June isn't a material difference for us. So if we want, I think what we're saying probably is the first time we're going to be ready to, as a committee, to hear from them based on the typical way we schedule, or we don't schedule things during July. I guess a better way of saying it, it'd be probably sometime in August. So I think the point is we need to have the report ready by August.
Mhm.
And I think that means multiple versions or drafts that you're seeing right before then. So you all can figure it out from there. But I think as a committee, the formal report that we could meet as a group will probably be whatever schedule in August. Is that, Kevin, are you comfortable with that? So I think that's the direction we'd give you.
And you will see interim
Right.
reports as we go.
Okay. Excellent.
So, Chair, members of the committee, I know that there's a recommended item up there, but I would suggest that we change that to recommend approval of the federal engineering as the 911 consultant and for their contract not to exceed $150,000.
All right.
Make a motion to recommend approval of federal communication or federal engineering as a 911 consultant and for their contract not to exceed 150,000.
Okay. So we have a motion from Travis. Do we have a second?
A second.
Second from Scott. Very good. All right. So we have a motion, a second for approval of federal engineering. All those in the room, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. All right, staff, can you conduct a roll call for those participating virtually, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Dan Cotterman.
Aye.
Thank you. Joshua Wright.
Aye.
Thank you. David Raymer.
I vote aye. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Robert Bukowski.
Aye.
Thank you. Catherine Masters.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair, the motion has passed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we'll now move on to agenda item number 5, fiscal update. Going to receive a fiscal status update from the MR 911 staff. Liz Grayberg, 911 administrator, will provide this update. Liz.
Thank you, Chair Brady. Okay, so was there?
I like the other
Oh,
side
there
better.
it is. Panic, don't panic. So we were asked to condense and to project the rest of the year on our budget forecast for fiscal year 2023. So we went through and looked at the first column is the budget, or the second column is what did we submit to the state for a grant. So originally, when we submitted the fiscal year 2023, it was in a total of 12,731,455. Of that, the state approved 9,9,718,072.54 What, and I also need to make sure you understand that that includes an amendment that the state approved for the Phoenix PD project to have some additional funds in there. So that number does include that amendment. So we're working out the 9.7 million of that. The next column shows you what we've expended year to date, which is a little about 50% or 47%. It's 4,700,000. I'm sorry, my eyes are bad. 4,573,936.81. And then we broke down the percentages to show you where how much we've spent and what we project to spend in the next one. So for example, personnel, we're about right on track at 52% halfway through the year. The monthly contracts, we've only spent 45%, and we expect a little over $1 million savings because we're decommissioning legacy telecom as part of the NG 911 project. But we might have to put an asterisk on that because that has changed on decommission. We'll find out, but that's what we're projecting we'll be able to say. Mesa's 3 additional workstations came in, had a project savings of that we saved an additional 79,000. I think that's the column that's missing on there. Yeah. That would be able to push over to that. And then we see this where the state on the workstations for Gilbert and for Goodyear, the state rejected those items.
Liz, what's the,
Yep.
can you just quickly, I'm sorry, just this spreadsheet you're giving to us with this as of what date? Is this
This-
last month? This week?
Last month,
Last month, okay.
yeah. The document, the spreadsheet, the detailed spreadsheet we work off of is is a living document, so it changes daily as we put in expenditures. But this is what we did actually mid-month of January.
So help me understand why there's these. So do cities, so he says, I see this Mesa, Goodyear, Gilbert, Scottsdale. So each year, why aren't every city listed up there? Do they not all have a request every year?
That is correct.
Okay, so but there's not like a particular life cycle schedule for the whole region to know kind of as a region when equipment would come up? I mean, or is that, I'm just curious why it breaks out that way and why someone like Gilbert or even Scottsdale, why would those be denied by the state?
So there is a life cycle, and part of our MAG budgeting process for 911, we do a 6-year forecast, and the PSEPs put in what they are given the opportunity to say what they want or their needs for the next 6 years. And then we put that together, that forecast to see. And the first year of that forecast is going to be for the next fiscal year. So that's the area that they have all the justification of the positions, the logging recorders, all the things they ask. And then the other 5 years are just a projection. It's not anything that they need. It's just forecasting is all. And so in the instance of this fiscal year, those were the requests, Mesa's 3 additional positions, Goodyear's 4, Gilbert's 5 positions, and logging reimbursements for Gilbert and Scottsdale. So the state, we submitted it, that's what the 12 million, and the state came back and said that Gilbert and Goodyear did not meet the requirement to get additional positions, a requirement that the state has based on 911 call volume.
Do they have a threshold out there, or is it just something you submit and then they tell you whether you met it or not, or is it a
So-
known standard?
So they, well, it's a standard that they've developed where,
Is it, I mean, is it available for someone to see before they make an application?
yeah, yes, and and it's a changing document because what they do is they took 6 months worth of 911 calls statewide and then divided up what the average was for a call workstation to answer X amount of 911 calls.
But that assumes that that's the best practice standard then, not necessarily, I mean, that's just what's actually happening. That's not necessarily saying what's ideal, right?
That's correct. It's just real simple. Here's all the 911 calls we've had. This is how many 911 call workstations we have in the state divided up. And if you beat this threshold.
So if
we get-
everybody is overwhelmed, it doesn't matter. It's just, you have to wait till you get to that threshold.
So the, one of the variants it has, so if you're a small agency
Oh.
and you only have 2 positions and you're busy and you need a third, you probably are not going to get it because then you have our largest agency, Phoenix PD, who has so many calls that they would easily be able to add according to that ratio position.
Yeah, good point.
Right, Liz, it's 911 only. They're
Yeah,
not
911.
factoring in all the administrative phone calls and stuff that are also filtering in,
Non-emergencies.
correct, that are coming into PSAP. So I have a question, Liz, on the Mesa PD one. I saw that you submitted 150, the state approved 150, and the expenditure so far is 70. Is that the final expenditure for Mesa, or is there more to come?
It's the final expenditure.
Okay.
So Liz, when I see what the state approved and I see the expenditure, when the state approves it, do they send Scott a check for $9.7 million and just make sure he spends it that way? Or do you have to go spend it and then ask for reimbursement?
It's a reimbursement. So the city of
They
Phoenix,
don't trust Scott with the $9.7 million.
apparently not. So they stake,
Okay,
the
the
city-
reimbursement.
Right, it's a reimbursement.
So the green is just what's been reimbursed to date.
That is correct.
So are there others who are waiting pending reimbursement, or is that pretty much?
I'm sorry, the green is monies we've encumbered. So there might be some numbers inflected where
Oh, okay, okay.
we've issued a PO, we're waiting on delivery, things like that, but that's the monies that have been encumbered.
So for example, let's just pick Mesa. So Mesa picks, so they've spent the 70,000 or you're saying that's, what was the question you asked, Brittany?
Yeah, she
That's
said that was final.
final,
There's
so-
more money coming out of that.
So what happens to that 70? Does it roll into next year for our budget, or does it just throw back into the state pot?
So then what we will, by theory, what happens is we as a region ask the state, can we reallocate that 76,000 savings into a different area where we might need the funds to cover the overage, to cover something new or something needs of the PSAP. So the savings, we don't get to automatically direct to apply it to anywhere else. That has to be approved by the state.
Okay, so talk to me about the Gilbert. It says state denied on the 5 additional, and you're saying that was because they didn't meet the
Threshold.
threshold of use, but then it says
They're
going
logging.
down lower, they withdrew.
Yep, so they had a login recorder request reimbursement. That's part of the 911 funds. Can be used for a partial reimbursement when an agency buys a login recorder. And the town of Gilbert withdrew their request. I'm assuming it's because they're going with they're leaving the region and going to the state model.
So what does that mean?
So that means that the monies that was approved can be redirected with the state's permission.
So when someone like Gilbert withdraws from MR 911, now how does the state look at them while at the same time looking at the balance of the region? How do they compete? Is it just like anybody? Because I think the concern I have is I keep hearing these questions, right? From other participants, like what's the value of being part of MR 911? Why don't I just break off and go be like Gilbert and be be independent of the conference here over here and just compete? And I don't know who they're competing against. I guess it's still the same standard. Are they? So help me out with that. How does that work?
So this is all new to us as well, but I'm assuming from the way they're moving their projects, them and Wickenburg, that they're dealing directly with the state. So it's no longer part of a regional. They are just one-on-one with the state. The state's
So what if we
managing.
all decided to do that? Well, no, I'm just
Yeah, I know.
theoretically, that
Okay,
would we, the
Theoretically,
money would be there, but then the state would have to deal with each of us separately. Is that right?
yeah, so that would be the question is this, is the state, are each agency, member agency wanting to deal directly with the state? Then is a 911 part of MAG then? Because would it need to be part of MAG? If you're negotiating with the state, the City of Mesa and the city of Glendale, that we wouldn't do stuff as a region, as a budget. It would be individual ones.
Right. So if someone believed because maybe they were told you'll have a better chance of getting funded if you do it separately than having to go through the region, that would be one part of that. Or that'd be one idea, I guess. But I don't know how would the state at some point would have to figure out then that, I don't know how they make those decisions, right? How do they make that comparative evaluation? Because it sounds like they may be kind of encouraging that to a certain degree.
You'd have to talk to the state.
Okay.
On that.
So let me ask this question then. That coordination on budget and equipment and personnel, how does that affect, I don't know what the right word is, being able to have connected communications among the agencies? I mean, could everybody be separate and still effectively have automatic aid and have that and have those connections? Because I guess other than, being together as a region, is that just a financial benefit? Is that a service, response benefit? Is that I think that's what I worry about is I heard Paradise Valley saying, well, they're going to go ahead and maybe they're going to move on and do something independent of MR 911 because they can't wait, or I can't remember what they were moving on. So I'm trying to understand, well, what are we missing here as far as the value of the region? Because if the state wants us all to be independent, I'm not advocating, but I've just got to play the extremes, right?
Right.
What if we just take all 30 of us, 24 of us and just said, okay, we'll blow it up and we'll all just be our own entity and we'll all go compete separately with the state? Or what's the advantage of being together?
I guess it just depends on what this committee would want. So right now, we participate in what was laid out originally with 911 back in the day, is where the state asked for one agency to represent a region. And most times, in most areas, it's the county, but us in Tucson do it a little bit differently. In the city of Phoenix and the city of Tucson act as the point of contact for the region on submitting a budget. So that's been happening for 20 plus years. So if the state, if the region says, we don't want to do, we want to go with the state networking, that'd be the next step up. That would mean that all the MR 911 network would cease to exist, and we would transition all the PSAPs into the state 911 network. At that point, then it's just doing the budget as a region and what we want, and that would still, that's how the rest of the state does it. If it takes it beyond that, that's when where it falls out of, or could, it's individual, you're going to be negotiating and you don't work as a region. So does that make sense?
Yeah,
Chair
well,
Bray?
I guess I'm not sure I understood the first point. I mean, the second point is some cities may think they have a better chance negotiating separately, right, than going through another layer of a regional process. But that's up to them, right, to make that decision. And I guess that's the concern, right? I think there's been some kind of conversation about funding and how things get funded and what's not. And I think that always, I think that transparency is, we need to keep working on that. But I guess beyond that, it just from an operational standpoint, because to say that the state has a network is great, but 6 years ago, it was a different vendor. And so it's like, I don't quite understand the motivation between the state to decide that XYZ, vendor is the best for everybody, because it changes. And I don't know if that's a decision they make for us or is a decision we make for us with them.
They state it's
Go ahead.
the state I think we've all had meetings with the state, at least probably the majority of us. I think, speaking a little bit on what Liz is saying, I think some of the advantages that they've stated is equipment, but they can do NG 911 for a fraction of the price of what we're currently paying through MR 911. And I don't have the dollar figure sitting in front of me because obviously I don't have the documents. But those are just a small few pieces of.
So they may say
some
we
of
have
the,
maybe
advantages.
they would suggest there's an opportunity for us to look at another option. right?
Correct.
They think might be less
Correct.
expensive. That's fair. But again, I think it's something every city, whether we do it together as a region or independent, we have to make that decision ourselves at some point, right?
Yeah, Chair Brady and members, if you remember, the concerns that we had in 2017 is the redundancy of the system. So if we go to the state system, then you are putting all of the state into one network. The idea when the state wrote the RFP for a 911 network, a next generation 911 network back in 2018, that there would be two to fell over to each other. There would be the MR 911 and then there would be the state. And that's how the RFP was designed, and that's how the vendors were selected, on that premise that you would have two networks, that if one failed, it wouldn't stop everything in the state of Arizona, but it would be going.
Mm.
So if the region decides to move to the state network, then that puts us all in one basket. But then that's why, as Brittany said, it is much cheaper to do it that way. So it is a cost saving.
So Liz, I'm confused by the state network and another vendor that's very large, that has a stadium in Atlanta. So how do we, I'm just trying to, I don't understand what it mean when you say the state network versus us selecting a vendor that sells the same products and equipment and software. I mean, couldn't we as a region go select the same vendor that they're promoting?
Yes,
But do it under our own terms?
absolutely.
Okay, so that wouldn't be considered the state network then?
No,
Okay.
and that wouldn't be a cost savings.
Well, no, but I mean, just saying, but from a procurement standpoint,
Yes,
right? Okay.
yes.
So
no,
there's a
okay.
difference between saying the states negotiate a particular package from a particular vendor. Do you want to be part of that? Or do we as a region decide what's the best for our region? And it may end up being the same vendor, same software, may or may not be under that contract. It may be independent of that, but it could be the same contractor though, right?
It could be the same contractor, but at one point, it could be the same contractor if it is a on-site premise. So AT&T has the majority of the PSAPs in Arizona, and they do a managed service. So when it goes managed services, that means the 911 equipment's in the AT&T networks. So if that's the case, if everybody went to that managed service with AT&T, then it would eliminate the need for MR 911. It would be useless because AT&T is going directly to the state EZNet state 911 network. So it doesn't mean we couldn't do business with AT&T and buy stuff. It also doesn't mean we couldn't do a managed service model within our region where the 911 equipment's off site and not a PSAP, and we can handle it that way. And I think that's kind of what the consultants are going to help us guide us through.
Yeah, Audrey, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Exactly. We directed the consultants in the scope of work to actually evaluate kind kind of a range of options from all the way where we are to all the way to the state and in between.
Okay.
So that we could look at those combinations of offerings. And I think, and Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, but to the point of the trade-off, I think the trade-off is ultimately cost and control. So, how much control do you want over what's selected and what's used and implemented versus the cost savings and less control? Is
Okay.
that accurate, Liz?
That's
So I think maybe one of the things we might want to do as a group, I'm not sure how to get there, but it seems like we need to have a statement of values that are most important for us at the outcome, right? Cost is one of those, right? But so are a lot of other things, right? Compatibility, being able to share information and talk to each other, reliability. I'm just making this up in my head, but whatever. So it seems like it'd be helpful for us as a group, maybe as a future exercise, to establish like those 5 or 6 pillars of like, this is the things that are most important. Because if just driven by cost, that may take you to a place where that's great, but maybe the reliability, maybe that it's not the best technology. But if you go down the path of other paths, you kind of have to figure what the balance is and all that. And it seems like it'd be a good idea for us, because we can go down these paths, right? This is great because it's going to be really less expensive and it's really simple. You just sign on the dotted line. But what's the trade-off? And maybe that's what the consultant's going to give us. But I think we also need to establish what those values are for us. Does that make sense? Go ahead,
I
Kevin.
guess the consultant's gonna really break this down in several elements. I would think the first we want to look at is the network. And they'll help us do the analysis of whether we continue to maintain our existing network versus using other options that are out there. And then I think we would have different potentially standards. Because I would tell you, when it comes to resiliency and redundancy, that's the last area you probably want to cut corners just because of the dollar amount. And then you have the managed services component, of which we would have, I assume, several different vendors. We could, in theory, piggyback on maybe an existing state contract, almost like a linking contract, or we could negotiate with the same vendor and maybe we pick up savings because of critical mass. I don't know. I'd have to think that the number of actual volume that we would do probably I would argue, maybe be less expensive than what the state's paying statewide. I don't know. But I think that's where I think we'd have different standards really for both the network analysis and also then the managed services component.
Yes, Audrey, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. As part of task 1, the consultant should be reaching out to each of your agencies to discuss the relative importance and value to you of those different aspects of the network and kind of create almost a values map of what we're doing. And certainly the committee would also be an appropriate place to discuss that. But that is the first task. And I would encourage really free and open discussion with the consultant so that we can get a good idea of what trade-offs we're willing to make and kind of as a region, what our goals are.
Good point. So maybe that is an exercise for this group, as you go back to your different subgroups, to be having that conversation, because I think we need at some point, we're going to be faced with that, right? In the decisions we make. All right, Liz, any more clarity provide to us on finances?
I'm done unless somebody has a question.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I do have a question. If we go back to the additional 911 workstations for Mesa, and we budgeted 150,000, but the total cost was 70,000. Is that is there a reason, I guess, that we budget 150 unless did the quote change, or how does it end up being less than half?
What we used 150,000 as a placeholder, the quote came in under, and we also did a lot of work by MR 911, so we didn't have to pay services.
Okay, and then for the Gilbert workstations, wasn't that something that had been at least partially approved, and then Gilbert decided to withdraw their request for that?
Gilbert was approved for 3 additional positions in fiscal year 2022. And fiscal year 2023, they asked for additional 5 positions. The 5 positions were denied.
Okay, so that the withdrawal was on a previous year. And then when we come down to the logging recorders, for Gilbert's, the money was approved, and for Scottsdale's, the money was denied. Do you have any reason why those two would be different like that?
Karen, did the state not meet with you? Because when they told me of Scottsdale's denial, they said that they had already met with you to explain the reason of why they denied.
My
your thing.
understanding was that logging recorders were just not approved.
Yeah.
Was
that's what
that-
the
was that a
state told-
misunderstanding?
Was that what the state told you? Because when they revealed in March of what was cut and what they didn't approve, one of the things that Mr. Jensen said is he had already met with you and reviewed why that you weren't getting, Scottsdale was not getting reimbursed.
And I know that our logging recorder was actually put in a couple of years ago. I think that do you know when Gilbert's was put in?
It was put in fiscal year 2023.
It was, okay.
I mean, and for years, logging recorders were not approved. So maybe that's what you're thinking, the state, and it's always been by the state. We've never denied a logging recorder reimbursement.
Okay.
And the state was this their first year with Gilbert and they withdrew it.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin.
So Liz, if we went back and looked at prior FY budgets, 22, 21, 20, and we're showing here, if I'm reading this correct, is that we now are, unless we take on additional projects, we're looking at about $1.3 million of excess. Is that correct in terms of savings between forecasted expenditures and state approved budgets? My first question is that common that we would see a number like that if we went back and looked at prior budgets?
It depends on, it was like last year, we did have a 2.5 million that was left unspent because of different things that we had budgeted and asked for and that were approved that didn't happen through AMR's project wasn't funded. We had a huge savings with Sprint. And then we found that CenturyLink was overcharging us quite a bit. So those adjustments were part of that factored in, but usually within a budget, we'll have some overages, depends on the year. In this instance, we're having the telecom legacy equipment is being decommissioned. So for example, CenturyLink repair Lumen, we pay approximately 190,000 a month. And that will go away, and that saving is represented in there. So all those monthlies will drop off, and then the savings that we had with the Gilbert withdraw and with the Mesa savings as well.
Yeah, so yeah, the decommissioning was probably not a normal occurrence
That is
within
correct.
the budgeting. I guess my reason why I was asking the question, so the chances of us getting state to approve additional projects in FY 23, is that a likely scenario? Are we able to even know what we would suggest and be able to implement, or is it more than likely going to go back and just be, I essentially turn back to the state, I would assume.
Yeah.
And then that kind of led my second question does it make sense to always have a number of projects and maybe we over project knowing that we typically have some savings that can kind of keep us expending the money? Because I know the cities, I hear a lot that there's always additional equipment that could be utilized in terms of the upgrade, because we kind of do things in cycles. To have $1.3 million not being able to be used, there's certainly a number of workstations that could have been updated and stuff. So I just want to know, how do we kind of walk ourselves through that concern?
Chairman Phelps, members, so we have put in budget amendments to help us spend that 1.3 million and actually ask for additional for projects. An example is Luke Air Force Base. What we were quoted by the vendor was not what they needed. We are short 64,000 for all their needs. So we have a budget amendment for that, for Avondale and ASU to have their equipment moved up a year to help balance the Phoenix PD.
Okay.
Pushback. So we do have that, but it's not they're not approved. We haven't gotten an approval yet from the state. So that's why I didn't reflect it in funds that we don't have.
Go ahead, Brittany.
So Liz, on those amendments that have been submitted to the state, do we have any type of, when did you submit those? And do you have any idea of when you might hear back from the state on whether it's approved or denied?
So we've been submitting amendments to the state on and off since July, and none of them have been approved until December, and that was the Phoenix PD portion. The others are still in limbo, and we are still waiting for an answer.
And Chairman Brady,
Yes, Scott. go ahead.
building on that response, as far as the amendments and Chairman Phelps's comments. So all the funds that are projected to be unspent have been submitted through an amendment process to spend them on other projects, moving some from the 2024 into the 2023 to do that. As Liz said, we have submitted those amendments and they were denied by the state. In my role again with Phoenix Fire, overseeing the MR91, we did meet with state ADOA, their staff approximately 2 weeks ago to try to get these amendments approved for the region. They'd asked for more clarification. So a letter was sent breaking down all 4 projects, why we were requesting it, why they're moving from 1 year fiscal year to another fiscal year, and really breaking down clearly the impacts. For instance, as Liz said, in 2022, the GMR project didn't occur because they were moving their facility, their lease wasn't in place. So that was a realized savings reflected in the budget as savings. So we're trying to get that approved for this fiscal year because now they're ready. Explanation to the state was if the state doesn't fund that amendment, GMR will be forced to, because they're moving to a facility, fund their own project and then potentially try to seek reimbursement from the state. So that was clearly articulated, I believe, very, very thoroughly. We're hoping and for response this week. My plan was to follow up Friday with the state grants person. So we really know, we understand the impact of the region on these projects that are limbo and really wanted to provide a definitive answer to everyone where the status of their projects are.
Go get them, Scott. Is there, do we have any idea what the balance of funds available are at the state? Because obviously, I don't know, we could look and see, we can estimate how much they're collecting each year. But at the rate at which they deny things, I'm assuming there's an accumulated balance somewhere. Do we have any idea what that number looks like? I mean, are they denying things because they're short on cash, or are they denying things because they just need more information, or?
Chairman Brady, I can add a little context to that conversation, having been involved in several conversations with ADOA over the last 6 months. Much of this is driven by a funding challenge for the state. While there is a surplus at this point, that surplus is being depleted, and the projections are that they will not have enough funds over the next several years. And there is not a current appetite to try to raise the excise tax to generate revenue. So much of these issues, for instance, even on what projects are denied or approved and why they need to be cycled over a 6-year period, regardless of whether MR91 manages that or the state, those funding challenges are going to exist. Projects could not all be funded in 1 year for all projects requested. So there are funding challenges for the state. We certainly appreciate that and are trying to work with them on that.
Okay, thank you. Well, that would be informative, right? To understand that forecast of projected revenues versus the growing demand and understand what that looks like for all of us, right? I'd like to know what that looks like, because we always sure every community kind of builds an assumption that some of this, our needs are going to be addressed by the state. But if we're saying that, I don't know, whenever 5 years from now, that could be a lot less, would be nice to know that ahead of time. So, because it may be that it's static on the revenues coming in, or it's very slightly increasing, but the growth and the demand on the system is much greater, and I think communities need to know that. So,
Chairman Brady, members, I can tell you that the state collects approximately, and it's been pretty steady, 18 million a year for 911 excise tax. The last budget that they approved for the statewide was approximately 22 million. So you can see that it's over 4 million beyond what we're collecting for that year. Of that, the Maricopa Region's portion was 42%. So it is going to be a funding challenge. When we started 2018, we had a $40 million, the state had a $40 million reserved. And I believe when I looked at the report for last year, it's down to 13 million. So
Okay.
spending it that trend, and then, but what we collect is not going to sustain what we have statewide. I don't believe, unless something changes.
Thank you. All right, enough of this. Anybody? Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
Hi, Goodyear PD. So a couple questions I have. When it comes to reporting, does the state get reports throughout the year to see if they want to change on what funding may be able to be used for other projects if it's not getting used? So in other words, if we have, I'll just take a number. At the end of the year, if we have, let's say, $300,000 left over, what happens to those funds? My understanding is it gets rolled over. Or does that go back to the state, or can they decide to use those funds for something else that might have not been funded throughout the year to try to play catch up?
So Chief Rodriguez, members, we don't remember, it's a reimbursement.
You
So
never
we
get
don't
it
have the
cumulative.
monies in
You're never going
coffers.
to get that.
And then we always have to ask the state to reallocate it, even if it's under, but within our fiscal footprint. We still have to ask permission to reallocate it.
Yeah, my error. I'm used to other grant funding in
We
the
all
state,
are.
but so I got to keep on reminding
Yeah.
myself that it's
Yeah.
reimbursement. Thank you.
Chairman Brady, one thing for context that might help the group, because we're all familiar certainly with UASI and Shish Gap and government highway safety funds. It's really works similar as that, right? There's a reallocation or a reimbursement grant when there's funding identified, for instance, in UASI funds, we put in for projects to reallocate those funds. Generally, they are approved by the committee. Shish Gap is done through the RAC to reallocate those funds. So it really is very similar to that. That's what the amendment process is. It's asking for reallocation of projected, revenue or projected funds for other projects that fall within the purview of MR91.
Okay, thank you. Is that it on this item? Anybody virtually have any comments, thoughts? All right. I think this is just for discussion. Thanks, Liz, for that. Now we have just, if you have any updates, we're going to go to the different committees to see if there's any items they'd like to bring forward. I guess Brittany will ask you anything you want to bring forward at this time.
Yes, good morning. I do. I think kind of what Karen and I put together is just some more, probably some healthy information and conversation on a lot of stuff that's already been discussed this morning. But as she and I first addressed this committee in the very beginning, we identified specific concerns within our region, and those were being equipment and budget. And we understand that the opportunity is going to be made available to have some of this addressed with the consultant, but we also believe that these concerns need to be continued to be talked about and addressed at this level so we can have some good conversations. The two concerns that we wanted to address today and continue to bring to the surface were equipment and, again, budget. The first concern of equipment is the equipment that have been requested by PSAP managers in our region. Over the past 2 years, agencies within the Maricopa County region have been denied requests over and over for equipment that is now being provided to agencies across the state through the state. This began with phone upgrades in Goodyear PD and MCSO when these agencies were not given any choice for their phone vendor. Their vendor was chosen for them by Liz. Additionally, Chandler specifically asked to be upgraded to Vesta and were given a price close to $80,000 for an agency to pay in order to change over to the Vesta platform. This was not feasible at the time, and Chandler unfortunately had to upgrade to Viper. No other agencies were charged to use the Vesta system moving forward. PSAP managers then began expressing interest in the ability to hot seat at other agencies, use laptop phone systems, as well as use of the Vesta phone features such as smart transcription and citizen input, just to name a few. Liz Graber and Mike Benjamin advised that MR 911 would not support laptop phones or hot seating. Liz advised agencies desiring additional phone features that the agency would need to pay for those features, whereas all of these things are being made available to agencies everywhere else in the state through the state system. The second concern is our budgeting process. In the last 911 study committee meeting, Karen Sutherland asked if the budget working group had participated in the budget process this year and if they had received this information. Liz advised that the budget working group had been involved and was sent information. You can refer to page 4 of the minutes from the last meeting. Members of the budget working group have stated they were not sent the information and have not reviewed any quotes from any of the vendors. We request that Liz produce the vendor quotes for the work that has been requested for this fiscal year along with the next fiscal year so that we can compare to the amount being requested. At our last meeting, it was suggested that we not dive deep into the budget, but instead keep this on a high level. That would be sufficient for an oversight process as long as there's an accountability to a group that can verify that the numbers have been reviewed and are correct. However, this is lacking in the MR 911 budget process. PSAP managers declined to approve the budget due to concerns with the budget and MR 911 funds. They were asked to hold their concerns for the study committee. Meanwhile, the oversight committee passed the budget after threats were placed on the table that failure to approve the budget may result in losing all funding, a claim that has been strongly denied by the state 911 office. All of these things have left the PSAP manager group with a lot of continued concerns related to who is providing oversight for the regional 911 funds.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Any questions?
Yeah, I was
for-
going to say any questions or
questions
comments
for
on that.
Brittany? All right, thank you for that input. All right, we'll move to Chair Walker. Do you have any items? you'd like to
Chair,
sh- Oh,
if I may, this is Chantel over here.
oh, there you are.
If I may, in response to Brittany's comment, for these PSAP meetings going forward, the budget will be a standing item on the agenda. So to your concerns, we hope to address them in future meetings.
Thank you, Chantel. All right, move on to item 7. Chair Walker.
Chairman Brady, Chairman Phelps, the oversight team did not meet since our last meeting of the study group. A couple of the comments I did want to share for the groups information is the amendments, which we talked about. So the amendment for ASU project, Luke project, GMR project, Avenel project, and the Glendale equipment upgrades. Those are in amendment process. As I mentioned, we did meet and we're working to try to secure funding for those. We were also notified approximately 3 weeks ago that the state has once again paused the MR 911 portion of the ComTech project. This is a statewide project that is sharing IP addresses for location services. And the state has notified us again that we will be on pause until really, I believe, the work of this committee is completed in a direction of where MR 911 will go is, I believe, their intent. And then beyond that, we are working to secure funding for next year at this point. The grant portal has not been opened and we're still working with the state to ensure we have funding for next year for MR 911. That's all I had to report.
Thank you, Chair. All right, that next item would be a request for future agenda items. Anybody, any thoughts? So Audrey, help me out. So I think the approval for the contract for the federal
Engineering.
engineering, sorry, will go get, it needs to be approved by regional council. Is that happening this week or soon?
Chairman, yes, it is on the agenda for Wednesday's meeting with the regional council.
Okay,
So our hope would be to have a contract in place by next week.
okay. So for this committee, what would be the next, what could we be doing during that period of time? Any thoughts?
So I would have to double check the schedule. I think there'll be a report on their progress at the next meeting. I'll have to, when we finalize the contract, I'll know for sure. They will have begun meeting with the agencies before your next meeting. And the advisory group will be providing input to that. I know you stated you would like to have a discussion at this group. Obviously, we had the ongoing issue of financing, but you also wanted to talk a little bit about prioritization in this group as well, so we
Yeah.
can look at putting that on the agenda.
Maybe it would be helpful as the consultants kick off their, as they go around outreach, that part of that would be coming and maybe visiting with us as a group to introduce us and maybe kind of working through their understanding of their scope of how they're going to go about doing their scope of work. And maybe that's an opportunity for us to kind of get to know them, make sure we feel comfortable that it's, you know, it's a deeper dive into what they're going to do. We know they're going to go meet with the different groups, but maybe addressing some of these other issues we have. Would that, maybe we could, I don't know when, you know, it's obviously after you execute the contract and they're on board, but maybe we could figure out a way to schedule that kind of a opportunity. Does that make sense?
Let me look at where things are at and come back to you with that. I know that we had them scheduled to begin work almost right away.
And that, I don't want to slow that part down. I'm just saying somewhere early on in the phase, we don't need to get in front of everybody else, but sometimes in that early phase, maybe it'd be good for them to come and meet with us as a committee.
I think we could certainly discuss having them present at your next meeting.
Okay.
And have an opportunity to receive
Yeah.
feedback from the group
Yeah,
at that.
yeah, I
that
don't
time.
slow them down. Let them go out and do all the gathering and input they need, but maybe somewhere in there, we built in an opportunity for them to meet with us.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, very good. Any other thoughts for future agenda items? Okay, if not, if there's no further business, today's meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.